Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello readers, and welcome to episode 6 of Fully Booked. I'm your host Natalie, and today's episode I'll be going over my autumn TBR for 2024. Now, it's technically still summer while I'm recording this, but for me, I feel like end of August signals the end of summer because school always started in September for me as a kid and in university. And even though I'm an adult now, it just feels like summer is over by now because a lot of big end of summer events have come and gone already around where I live. And a somewhat related side note, I feel like PSL/pumpkin spice is being brought back earlier and earlier in the year at Starbucks. Like, when I checked my Starbucks app in the second last week of August, and FYI, today is now August 27th, 2024, when I'm recording this, I already saw they had their whole line of PSL drinks available, as well as they introduced a few new drinks for this autumn. So in addition to the usual PSL and the apple crisp oat macchiato, hot and iced, they also now have the iced honey apple almond flat white, iced caramel apple cream latte, iced pumpkin cream chai, and iced apple crisp non-dairy chai. Actually, looking at the lineup, I'm unsure if any of these might have been available last year. I definitely don't remember the non-dairy chai though, and I know that the non-dairy cold foam/cream was only introduced in Starbucks this year, at least in Canada. Unfortunately, I am not having one of these newly mentioned drinks currently, but in honor of keeping with the theme of this episode, I am drinking a homemade iced pumpkin coffee while recording this, which was literally so easy to make and timely as I just received the Nespresso pumpkin spice cake pods in the mail this morning, and I used those to make my coffee at home today. Anyways, Starbucks and coffee overall aside, I really do get most excited for autumn as a season overall. While I certainly enjoyed soaking up all the sun and all the activities like outdoor festivals and lazy park days, there's nothing like the crispness of the cooler air, crunch of leaves on the ground, if you live in a climate with drastic change of seasons like I do, seeing fall colors while hiking, apple picking, etc. But what I really love of autumn, and any change of season really, is the change in my reading/TBR. Now that I've had enough time spent devouring all those beach/lakeside town summer romance reads, there are so many books I look forward to reading as we get into sweater weather, and today I'm going to share the 6 books that I hope to read this autumn. Disclaimer, I do have some other books that I hope to read in general this fall over October to November. However, I'm not going to include those books as they're not specifically autumn/cozy/spooky season related, and will instead save those to talk about in my monthly wrap-ups if I end up reading them. Now with that being said, here's my autumn TBR for 2024. So the first book I have on my TBR is The City Baker's Guide to Country Living by Louise Miller, and it goes like this. A full-hearted novel about a big city baker who discovers the true meaning of home and that sometimes the best things are found when you didn't even know you were looking. When Olivia Rawlings, pastry chef extraordinaire for an exclusive Boston dinner club, sets not just her flambéed dessert but the entire building alight, she escapes to the most comforting place she can think of, the idyllic town of Guthrie, Vermont, home of Bag Bomb, the country's longest-running contra dance, and her best friend Hannah. But the getaway turns into something more lasting when Margaret Hurley, the cantankerous sweater-set-wearing owner of the Sugar Maple Inn, offers Livy a job. Broken knowing that her days at the club are numbered, Livy accepts. Livy moves with her larger-than-life, uber-enthusiastic dog, Salty, into a sugar house on the inn's property and begins creating her mouth-watering desserts for the residents of Guthrie. She soon uncovers the real reason she has been hired, to help Margaret reclaim the inn's blue ribbon status at the annual county fair apple pie contest. With the joys of a fragrant kitchen, the sound of banjos and fiddles being tuned in a barn, and the crisp scent of the orchard just outside the front door, Livy soon finds herself immersed in small-town life. And when she meets Martin McCracken, the Guthrie native who has returned from Seattle to tend his ailing father, Livy comes to understand that she may not be alone in this world as she once thought. But then another new arrival takes the community by surprise, and Livy must decide whether to do what she does best and flee, or stay and finally discover what it means to belong. Olivia Rowlings may finally find out that the life you want may not be the one you expected. It could be even better. This book sounds like it has all the makings of a truly cozy fall, small town read. I've also specifically heard that this is the book for you if you're a fan of Gilmore Girls, which I definitely am. But looking at the reviews, I'm a little confused what season this book takes place in and would be appropriate to read in real time, as it's been promoted as a fall read in other bookish podcasts that I've listened to, but some people are saying that it's a good summer read here. But seeing as the summary mentions an apple pie contest, that screams very fall to me, as apple picking season is usually in its peak from September to October, around where I live. And side note, I love all the cute and quirky names like the Sugar Maple Inn and her dog Salty, but dogs and books always get me no matter what. Nevertheless, so many elements of this story, from the small town setting to delicious homemade desserts, make for the perfect cozy read that will have you wanting to curl up with a PSL, which is my plan for sure. Next up on the list, we have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sengu Mandana. A warm and uplifting novel about an isolated witch whose opportunity to embrace a quirky new family and a new love changes the course of her life. As one of the few witches in Britain, Mika Moon knows she has to hide her magic, keep her head down, and stay away from other witches so their powers don't mingle and draw attention. And as an orphan who lost her parents at a young age and was raised by strangers, she's used to being alone and she follows the rules, with one exception: an online account where she posts videos pretending to be a witch. She thinks no one will take it seriously. But someone does. An unexpected message arrives, begging her to travel to the remote and mysterious Nowhere house to teach 3 young witches how to control their magic. It breaks all of the rules, but Mika goes anyway, and is immediately tangled up in the lives and secrets of not only her 3 charges, but also an absent archaeologist, a retired actor, 2 long-suffering caretakers, and Jamie. The handsome and prickly librarian of Nowhere House would do anything to protect the children, and as far as he's concerned, a stranger like Mika is a threat. An irritatingly appealing threat. As Mika begins to find her place at Nowhere House, the thought of belonging somewhere begins to feel like a real possibility. But magic isn't the only danger in the world, and when a threat comes knocking at their door, Mika will need to decide whether to risk everything to protect a found family she didn't know she was looking for. Now, I know that books about witches and magic are always perfect for spooky season reads. However, I'm not really a fan of most books about magic or spooky season, besides Harry Potter. So if I am going to try reading one, I prefer something with a more lighthearted tone and not something high stakes. And specifically with fantasies that have the magic element, I find that most books don't do a great job describing the magic system, and it can be hard to follow the story when the magic system is either too simplified or too complicated. But when it's a cozy fantasy where the aim isn't really to understand the magic system and it's just being utilized as a soft device/system, then I feel like it's more palatable for me to wrap my head around and read about. So hopefully this book will end up being a good starter to get into other similar cozy fantasy/magical books, as so far the only cozy fantasy I've really read is Legends and Lattes. And if I end up liking this one, I saw that she has a new book coming out called A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping, so it looks like I'll have more books to keep adding to my seasonal TBRs. Next up on the list, we have The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Nobody Owens, known to his friends as Bod, is a perfectly normal boy. Well, he would be perfectly normal if he didn't live in a graveyard, being raised and educated by ghosts, with a solitary guardian who belongs to neither the world of the living nor the world of the dead. There are dangers and adventures for Bod in the graveyard, the strange and terrible menace of the Sleer, a gravestone entrance to a desert that leads to the city of ghouls, friendship with a witch, and so much more. But it is in the land of the living that real danger lurks, for it is there that the man Jack lives, and he has already killed Bod's family. So I've heard that this is one of Neil Gaiman's well-known works and was curious to try reading, especially because I don't typically pick up that many middle grade/YA fantasy books. Of course, the element of ghosts, witches, and other paranormal figures makes this book an excellent eerie read for fall/spooky season. Now, I would like to comment here that all the books I'm discussing in this episode are not by authors that I've already read/usually would read. So I definitely don't have as much to comment on in terms of writing style, similarly used literary devices, tropes, etc., since I'm unfamiliar with these authors and their works. But I am trying my best every year to branch out more and more in terms of genres and authors that I read. So I hope to continue doing that by reading this book and more. Moving on to book number 4 on this list, Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Maggie Holt is used to such questions. 25 years ago, she and her parents, Ewan and Jess, moved into Badenberry Hall, a rambling Victorian estate in the Vermont woods. They spent 3 weeks there before fleeing in the dead of night, an ordeal Ewan later recounted in a nonfiction book called House of Horrors. His tale of ghostly happenings and encounters with malevolent spirits became a worldwide phenomenon, rivaling the Amityville Horror in popularity and skepticism. Today, Maggie is a restorer of old homes and too young to remember any of the events mentioned in her father's book. But she also doesn't believe a word of it. Ghosts, after all, don't exist. When Maggie inherits Badenberry Hall after her father's death, she returns to renovate the place to prepare it for sale. But her homecoming is anything but warm. People from the past, chronicled in House of Horrors, lurk in the shadows. And locals aren't thrilled that their small town has been made infamous thanks to Maggie's father. Even more unnerving is Badenberry Hall itself, a place filled with relics from another era that hint at a history of dark deeds. As Maggie experiences strange occurrences straight out of her father's book, she starts to believe that what he wrote was more fact than fiction. In the latest thriller from New York Times bestseller Riley Sager, a woman returns to the house made famous by her father's best-selling horror memoir. Is the place really haunted by evil forces, as her father claimed? Or are there more earthbound and dangerous secrets hidden within its walls? Now, it's interesting I ended up choosing to include this in my autumn TBR, as I do have other books of Riley Sager's saved on my general TBR and that are more widely read. However, I happened to hear/come across this book, and the horror/paranormal element intrigued me, as I usually only read psychological or crime thrillers, which is other books fall more under these categories. And horror is something that I've yet to even branch out and try in my reading, although I do have Stephen King as an ultimate author to read one day. I'm curious as to how reading a book of this nature will be, as I used to watch a lot of horror movies as a teen and in my university days, and loved the thrill of being scared back then. As I've gotten older, I've moved away from this genre in movies, but I'm still open to trying horror books like this one to continue exploring different writing styles/voices, as well as just get in a good scare for spooky season this year. Moving on to book number 5, we have Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Charlotte Bronte tells the story of orphaned Jane Eyre, who grows up in the home of her heartless aunt, enduring loneliness and cruelty. This troubled childhood strengthens Jane's natural independence and spirit, which prove necessary when she finds employment as a governess to the young ward of Byronic brooding Mr. Rochester. As her feelings for Rochester develop, Jane gradually uncovers Thornfield Hall's terrible secret, forcing her to make a choice. Should she stay with Rochester and live with the consequences, or follow her convictions, even if it means leaving the man she loves? A novel of intense power and intrigue, Jane Eyre dazzles readers with its passionate depiction of a woman's search for equality and freedom. So I've yet to read a classic of historical Gothic nature, and have had this book on my TBR for a while in general. For those of you who, like me, don't/didn't know what Gothic literature is, I found the following definition for it, which says, Gothic literature can be defined as writing that employs dark and picturesque scenery, startling and melodramatic narrative devices, and an overall atmosphere of exoticism, mystery, fear, and dread. So, from my understanding, it seems like Gothic literature is more dark in tone, as well as the actual setting in the book. While the Gothic setting is of course fitting as the colder weather starts to set in, this book is also intriguing due to its novel use of first-person narrative and commentary on social class and feminism. Actually, I think I'm always interested in reading classics and getting to read them from a modern perspective, and reflect on how the book would have been viewed back in its time period, since society has changed so much in the span of time since this book was written/published. And what's confused/surprised me most is how the age gap between Jane and Rochester seems more questionable to us as modern readers, but not to the readers back then, at least from what I could find in my online research. I usually find age gap romances in modern books very icky, so I'm interested to see how the relationship and overall story in Jane Eyre plays out. Finally, for the last book of my autumn TBR, we have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Oliver Marks has just served 10 years in jail for a murder he may or may not have committed. On the day he's released, he's greeted by the man who put him in prison. Detective Colburn is retiring, but before he does, he wants to know what really happened a decade ago. As one of 7 young actors studying Shakespeare at an elite arts college, Oliver and his friends play the same roles on stage and off: hero, villain, tyrant, temptress, ingenue, extra. But when the casting changes and the secondary characters usurp the stars, the plays spill dangerously over into life, and one of them is found dead. The rest face their greatest acting challenge yet, convincing the police and themselves that they are blameless. Of course, my autumn TBR wouldn't have been complete without a dark academia novel, and this one certainly sounds mysterious and suspenseful. Again, tragic novels / tragedies are not my usual cup of tea, but I did enjoy some of Shakespeare's works that I had the chance to read in high school, so the Shakespeare element in this modern book definitely intrigued me. And thinking back to all the Shakespeare plays I had the chance to read, I would say my favorite one was Hamlet, which is one of his well-known tragedies. And for the record, I also read Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and Taming of the Shrew in high school. And Shakespeare aside, I'm always up for a murder mystery novel, and I'm hoping this book will prove to be very original in presenting the tale of events, as it's been very talked about in the book community when it comes to dark academia novels. And that wraps up my autumn TBR for 2024. While there are a lot of contenders for my TBR, and maybe I'll end up reading those ones as well, I really try to curate a diverse list of books so that I could try a wider variety of genres, as well as having something for every one of my listeners on here. And hopefully I will not fall, behind in my reading this upcoming season and be able to get to as many of these books on the list as I can, if not all. Also, feel free to hit me up on any of my other social platforms linked below and let me know what you're putting on your autumn TBR this year, whether it's specifically seasonal related or not. Anyways, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you back here for episode 7. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.